Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ethex's webinar today on community-owned energy. We're just about to kick off. We've got an amazing panel with us today, and we're going to have a very fruitful discussion. So I hope you are all ready. Have your coffees at the ready whilst we get ourselves organised and let everyone into the webinar. So if you just bear with us for a moment, we will kick off. It's very timely at the moment to be talking about community energy, not only because Ethex has lots of community energy projects at the moment, but community energy and renewable energy in general and the whole green policy has obviously been in the news quite a lot over the last few days. So why don't we kick off, and I'll give you a quick introduction to myself and the panel. So welcome, I'm Lisa Ashford. I'm CEO of Ethex, which is a direct impact investing platform in the UK. We support a number of social enterprises and community businesses to raise finance, and we have a pool of very aligned, ethically aligned investors who support those projects. Joining me today, I'd like to introduce you to Alan Whitehead, who's MP and Shadow Minister for Energy Security. Good morning, Alan.
Morning.
We have Phil Coventry, who's Head of Operations at Community Energy England. Welcome, Phil.
Yeah.
We have Will Walker, who's Climate Action Manager at Power to Change. Welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning.
Michaela Krier, who's Head of Community Energy at Younity. Welcome. And
thank you.
Ant Flanagan, who is representing today Community Energy Together.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Ant. So we've got a really interesting panel who have got a lot to say. So I'm going to just very quickly give you some housekeeping, and then we'll move on to the discussion. So the webinar today is 1 hour. Just to remind you that this is not a financial promotion in any way. This is just for you to learn more about community energy and ask questions of our panel if you have any. If you do need any financial advice, please do seek out independent ethical financial advisor. We'll run the webinar for an hour today. If you have any questions, please do post them in the chat. I will try and feed them into the discussion if I can, and we will send out a webinar link at the end of the session because it will be recorded, and we can send out any links or further information. So without further ado, let's get going. So Alan, I was just saying to you that there was this fantastic headline in The Guardian yesterday. Labour's policies show parties spoiling for a fight on green issues. You've just come back from the Labour Party conference, and we're really keen to hear from you in terms of what's happening in the UK and how do you anticipate the net zero journey in the UK, and why isn't more low carbon energy generation happening at the moment? Over to you, Alan.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning. I'm delighted to be here today, although somewhat jaded, as I've mentioned to my colleagues here this morning, from about 3 or 4 days of really intensive discussion, fringe meetings and various other things, all about renewable and low carbon energy. I'm delighted that we've had that detailed discussion, but somewhat frazzled as a result of the intensity which that has taken part in. I can report that indeed it's been really elevating, I think, just with the intensity of commitment and resolve that there now is in the Labour Party circles on green and low carbon issues, and particularly a resolve not to go down the path that we've seen just recently from the Prime Minister, of kicking back on targets and trying to row back and damp down the commitments, and particularly the speed of commitments that we're going to need right now to get to net zero. So the results at party conference this week was to not to go down that path, but actually double down on the commitments and targets that we've got at the moment. So I'm very excited about that. Obviously, there's a small matter of getting through the next year to a position where we are able to start work on these sort of things. But just to outline those very briefly, what we now have is a commitment to completely decarbonize the power system by 2030. Now, that means an enormous change from what we're experiencing at the moment in the UK. Yes, renewables have really come forward very substantially from a standing start a number of years ago. I was looking at the last quarter's generating statistics, and in the last quarter, over 50%, just over 50% of generation for power was from renewable sources. So there's a very substantial base there, but still a very, very long way to go. And one of the areas that absolutely needs to function fully in terms of getting to that position of completely decarbonising the power sector has to be community and local generation. And although that's expanded very substantially in recent years, frankly, it's not gone as fast as I would have hoped, and nor has it gone that quickly in terms of what is happening in a number of other European countries, Germany, for example, in terms of what community and low carbon energy represents in their sectors. So we've got to ask ourselves, why is that, and what are the particular impediments that there are in place of the development of that community and local energy sector at the moment? And I might say, observing this as it goes through, the progress that has been made is really based on some astonishing and remarkable people who've actually battled against tremendous odds to get their projects underway, against a whole slew of things that in some instances physically stand in their way, but in other instances are based on how the regulations work, what you've got to, what hoops you've got to jump through to get to a position where you can even start thinking about a local or community project, and so on. And I would identify three areas which are really holding back and stopping, in many instances, community and local energy projects developing. The first one is what it is you can actually do with your product once you've got your scheme off the ground and running. And obviously one of the purposes of local and community energy is about landing the benefit of those projects within the local community. And the way the rules are set up at the moment, by and large, you just can't do that. And that also means in terms of how the scheme can be supported and developed. There's a real barrier quite often to being able to crowdsource and invest because of the perception that that benefit is not going to be there at the end. And what I mean by that, among other things, is that you should be able to develop your local community energy projects in such a way that they are trading locally, that they are bringing the benefit of what they're doing back into the local community as a result of that trading activity. And I think, as is widely known, what you've got to do at the moment nationally is do various things such as take out the equivalent of a national energy license. There are real barriers and impediments on generating your power locally and then trading it locally. You've got to act as if you were a national corporation, and then sort of tuck the energy back into local communities that way. And we've been hard at work in the energy bill as it's gone through Parliament over the last year, trying to get things into that legislation which actually change that way of doing things, so that actually local and community energy projects can really get the benefit of what they're doing locally and invest confidently that that can happen. You'll not be surprised to know that we haven't succeeded yet in getting those changes in the bill, but I hope that the energy independence bill that is being announced by or was announced at this party conference this weekend can actually rectify that and put those that different framework in place for making low carbon energy relevant and available at community and local level. Second problem is that I think it is generally known that just what a huge contribution local and community energy projects can make in aggregate. Estimate is something like, if you had everything firing across the country, you probably could get a sort of installed capacity of about 8 gigawatts or so across the country in local community energy. And of course that equates to, let's pluck a figure out of the air, at least the equivalent of 3 nuclear power stations across the country. So a really serious contribution to the aggregate of low carbon energy produced by the country. But what that also means is that the projects themselves, whilst they are very, very, very locally conceived, locally run, depending quite substantially on voluntary inputs of various people coming into the projects, they're big business. And that's one of the real impediments of driving projects through from conception to development to completion. Just the number of hoops that you've got to jump through, the amount of finance that you need to raise for the projects in advance of anything ever happening as far as the projects are concerned, the risk that therefore that entails to those people who are undertaking the projects, and the so-called valley of death that you've got to walk through with the development of the projects after the thing has been developed, where you're getting commissionings, sometimes having to spend up to £1 million getting the commissioning and planning and various other things through before the project actually starts, and therefore the extreme danger that projects are in during that extended passage of period before you can actually start, as it were, getting that money back by generating. So clearly what is needed is a much, much better, and I appreciate there are a number of companies and bodies around which are really trying to make that gap as small as possible and funded as well as possible. But certainly we think that bodies such as, which we also been, we announced fairly recently, Great British Energy, which is a publicly owned energy investment and catalyzing company, which would, among other things, invest at the top end of the largest projects. For example, those projects which have got problems of raising investment, have got problems of capital costs, have got problems of patient capital coming in to how they work, such as large-scale tidal range projects, tidal stream, probably grid enhancements, various things such as that. So why not turn that round and bring that back down to local level, so that actually you are place by place, area by area, helping to fund and stabilize and secure the passage of all those local projects to fruition and generation for the future. And among other things, what is being looked at is the carving out of a certain part of the funding for Great British Energy, which can specifically apply to that sort of support and development assistance for those local energy projects. And so something like £8 billion, we think, would be the sort of backup quantum level. That's not £8 billion thrown against the wall. That's £8 billion invested in those projects locally, effectively with Great British Energy, perhaps as a partner in those investments, but crucially, without running off and taking control of the project subsequently. It's about the support and catalyzation of projects, and not the taking over of control. Because what we clearly need to keep our focus on is that the energy and the commitment of those local projects is one of their biggest assets, and you don't need to dilute that by marching off and taking off into somebody else's control, much to the disappointment of those people who've worked so hard to get it going. So it has to be community and local energy projects run by community and local people, but the benefit for those community and local people and the support that you give it has to be effectively standing aside from questions of incorporating those projects into all sorts of other ownerships and managements and so on. So that's a sort of very, I'm sorry, I said a quick run through. I think I've gone on rather long, but a run through where we're thinking as far as the opposition party is concerned, and my shadow ministerial post is concerned, on community and local energy. But I think the bottom line is we think that form of energy entrepreneurialism and management and development is going to be so crucial for the next phase of our journey to net zero in the energy sphere. We've actually got to give it all the support we can and make sure it is as successful as possible.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate your thoughts there, and questions coming in thick and fast. So I'm sure we're going to try and circle back around to some of those. I think, particularly probably want to pick up on that idea of sort of centralizing versus, allowing, some of the successful entrepreneurial businesses to take forward solutions, but we'll come back around to that. Firstly, though, I wanted to bring in Phil. So we've heard there about some of the hurdles that community energy groups are facing when trying to bring forward projects. Can you tell us, on the flip side, where you're seeing actually what are the success stories, and how are the communities that you work with really delivering at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Alan. Thanks very much, Lisa, for the introduction. Thank you, Alan, for the very good summary of where community energy is at a policy landscape level. A lot of the issues that Alan highlighted are exactly what's holding community energy back, and we've been working closely with the Labour and cooperative parties on feeding in on some of that understanding of the sector and what's going on. So it's really good to see the opposition parties sort of picking this up and making a strong stand for the value of community energy and how it can contribute to the future energy system. But yeah, as Lisa said, I will just run you through some background to community energy and how it's developing and where the sector's at the moment. I just thought I'd introduce Community Energy England to mention quickly that we're the national network and representative body for community energy. We have over 280 members, ranging from the smallest of groups, unincorporated, just getting going, to larger groups who are very active and have been established for over 10 years, and a range of other sector stakeholders. So we bring all of those organisations, stakeholders together to help share lessons learned, to help each other overcome obstacles and establish new relationships. And then we advocate on behalf of the sector. So we represent it to government, political parties, the energy network operators and other stakeholders. So if you're not a member, I would encourage you to join Community Energy England if you have a relevant involvement or support for community energy. And in case anyone isn't aware and you're just new to this also, I'll define community energy. It's debated. There's no central definition because it contains so many different types of organisations and people doing different things. But we see it as the delivery of community-led renewable energy, energy demand reduction, and energy supply projects, whether wholly owned and/or controlled by communities, or through a partnership with a commercial or public sector partner. The key there, as Alan picked up, is the local origin of the project, the local governance and ownership of the project, and the flow back to a community, so that the place aspect is central to the whole concept. The three main pillars of the sector are the generation of renewable electricity, energy. That's solar is the key backbone, but there's also wind, hydro, a bit of biomass in the sector, and heating is something the sector is working on, although that is more challenging due to the complexity of heating networks in particular. Energy advice, which is working with those in fuel poverty and other vulnerable or marginalised people to help them reduce their energy use and navigate the very complex energy system that we all have in this country. And then lastly, energy efficiency and retrofit, which is working with and supporting homeowners and businesses to help them make a range of changes to their homes and buildings that will reduce their energy demand. And to give you an idea of scale, in 2021, which is our last figures, we skipped this year with our research, but that will be coming back in 2024. So back in 2021, the community energy sector powered 174,000 households in the UK. It reached out, connected to, talked to, engaged 217,000 people across the country. It raised £21 million of investment for new projects, and it returned £15 million back into local areas where those community energy organisations are located. Helped people save £3.3 million on their energy bills, and saved 143,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's the community energy sector in a nutshell and some statistics. And growth, as Lisa mentioned. So the sector continues to grow. Alan talked eloquently about the headwinds, the barriers the sector's faced, the way that the energy system and its regulatory structure has not facilitated community energy growing and expanding. The vision that we had 10 years ago for the sector and the kind of high pace of growth that it experienced at the time has not been maintained. And that's largely because of the policy and government support landscape in which the sector is trying very determinedly to operate. Nevertheless, the sector still grows, and incredibly determined people are making things happen in community energy. So the scale and the diversity of projects and activities is all growing. So the solar continues to be, the solar on rooftops in particular, continues to be the backbone of the sector. That, in case anyone is interested in just getting started, solar on rooftops is viable. You can do it now as a community energy organisation. You can get up and running and make that happen. That's viable at the moment. So that continues, groups starting out and expanding that area of activity. There's a huge pipeline across the sector of new sites and installations. And as Alan mentioned, the the share offers that are coming out. We're going to hear a bit more about that today, I'm sure. So the community energy sector continues to put community share offers out and raise money. The challenging economic conditions are making that harder, and again, I'm sure we'll hear more about that. But the sector is still drawing in significant amounts of investment. So we're also seeing some larger solar installations, such as low carbon hubs, 19 megawatt ground mounted solar farm, Bristol Energy Co-op's 1 megawatt Bottle Yard Studios rooftop solar, mouthful. They're both the largest community installations of their type, rooftop or ground mounted. So that was last year. So big successes. More and more organisations are starting to deliver energy advice, particularly prompted by the energy price increases and ongoing fuel poverty. These are very trusted services, very local by definition, and often situated in community centres and libraries. Organisations who've been at this for longer have started to create permanent hubs to give themselves a really lasting and visible presence in their communities to help. Increasing number of organisations are getting involved in retrofit, so we're seeing this much more mainstreamed in the way the sort of discourse around it. But people putting solar panels is more mainstreamed, but in general, people thinking about insulation, how they reduce their energy demand, that's much more common for people to talk about. So community energy is getting involved in various different business models of how they can facilitate that for householders, for businesses, project managing, or just providing advice. There's a kind of a range of ways they're doing it, but that's an increasing area. And across our sector, we're seeing demand for those kind of advice services and facilitation services far outstripping supply. And lastly, just a bit of innovation. I won't go on much longer, Lisa, just a little bit of innovation. The grassroots level, there's Community Energy South, one of our partner organisations. They've created a very successful pathways programme that's working with several county and borough councils to set up and nurture a network of new community energy organisations across each council area and help them become self-sustaining. So we've got new ideas and innovations that are happening to get new groups off the ground. At the more advanced level, there are various trials going on across the sector with how community energy can engage people with reducing or increasing their energy demand and shifting the time of day that they use energy to help with flexible management of the electricity grid, and then wanting to bring the revenue from those services back to communities themselves. And then organisations like Energy Local continue to develop means for local people, and I'm going to use air quotes, to buy the electricity that's produced by a local installation. Alan mentioned that in terms of local supply, which is a key path that we have for government and regulatory change on local supply. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Lisa. Thanks,
Phil. Great whistle-stop tour there of everything community energy. I'm going to come on to Michaela next, and from Younity, who's going to talk about the benefits of community energy, and just picking up on a few things that might run through your comments. You know, a lot of community energy groups working hard on addressing fuel poverty within their region, which is, you know, particularly important at the moment, like Phil mentioned. Perhaps your views on the sort of trading of energy locally, you know, energy efficiency trading like Energy Local, you know, how you see that, and being able to directly connect those community energy projects with end customers. Those questions seem to fall quite neatly into your remit, I think. So if you could kick off, Michaela, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And yeah, thank you, Alan and Phil, for your kind of very good insights into the community energy sector. So just, I guess, for a bit of an intro, who Younity are, because I appreciate everyone might not know who Younity are, but we are Octopus Energy, created a community energy focused joint venture with Mid Counties Co-op to kind of marry the ethics and values of a cooperative with the tech and innovation of Octopus. So Younity exists to support the community energy sector. So we work with groups primarily to buy the power that they produce, and we now work with over 250 groups, a third of the sector, which is great. And then we also help the sector through loan funding. So Phil mentioned the Bristol Bottle Yard 1 megawatt studio. We lent £1 million to Bristol Energy at the construction phase to help with the development of the project. So if anyone has any projects that they're looking for short-term 6 to 9 9-month development funding. That's where we can help. And then we also do grant funding. And then the latest thing is, you know, we work with Phil and the Community Energy England team, the groups that we speak with up and down the country, and a similar challenge of kind of time and resource. I know it's been mentioned on the chat, you know, community groups struggle to find the extra time and capacity. It's a huge bottleneck. So we've recently launched Community Energy Connect, which is a platform to connect groups that are looking for extra resource. And then we're going out to professional organisations. Like last week, we spoke to an engineering firm, presented there, and they're going to use their volunteering hours and they're going to put themselves on this platform. So that's called Community Energy Connect. So that's just a bit of an insight of where we are and where we work within the community energy space. And so I think on the points you just mentioned in terms of the local electricity supply, yeah, I mean, we get asked this on a regular basis, of course. And I think just a few things to mention before I go into that. Regardless of the size of your generation output, so Phil mentioned schools. Schools are obviously a wonderful example of community energy in action. It takes away the capex issue. It's visible, the schools get low carbon electricity, it goes back into educational programs, but those sorts of small community energy projects, they tend to be the first kind of step for a community energy group. If you're newly established and want to start, doing a rooftop solar on a school is a nice first step. And you know, if it's on-site consumption, that helps the economics stack up. So that's also why, you know, places like schools are so popular. When it comes to the school holidays and the school needs to export their electricity, regardless of the output, we will always purchase that energy. So I guess it's just to highlight that, you know, it isn't a case that you do need £1 million to get going. Like, you know, you can put solar on a local project and you can export, and people like us will buy that electricity. The question about the local electricity supply, the challenge we have there is the local electricity market doesn't really permit the rules and regulations. I know we've obviously got the Energy Local scheme, and that, you know, Younity and Octopus, we're the supplier that is involved in that. But that project came about through BEIS funding. So it's kind of it's a project that can't be expanded through us at the moment. And the reason why is because at the moment the rules of the road and the grid and the infrastructure, how everything's set up, you can't offer cheaper electricity if you happen to live locally or generate locally. And that's obviously the big issue, and that's why Octopus have advocated for their fan club, use that as an example, Energy Local as an example. But really, until you know, REMA, the electricity market reform happens and some of those changes happen, you can't technically offer local electricity, which is a problem, and which is why we're fighting for change and want to see that happen. But you need the infrastructure to change first, and the rules of the road. But I think in terms of, you know, local kind of benefits and how it gives back to communities, I think, you know, we see some wonderful examples. I mean, we see, you know, groups like Westmill, the established ones, they've distributed £500,000 to their local community in grant funding. Because the energy is, you know, it's not offshore, it's local, it gives that sense of empowerment. You know, people like Westmill, they've taken 12,000 visitors around their site, so you can really kind of see it in action. It isn't an abstract concept, and for me that's a huge benefit of community energy. I think, you know, eco-anxiety is on the rise, people can feel helpless. Community energy, you know, is a way of taking action and feeling empowered. Another projects that we've seen, you know, groups do wonderful examples. You know, instead of the beauty of community energy, rather than money going back to private shareholders, it goes back to the community, which is, I think, why we're all here and why we all love community energy. But examples of that have been, you know, we've seen groups do youth summits like Burnham and Westham. We've seen Repowering London do videos to go into year 5 school children to help with climate education. That's age appropriate. We've seen groups buy thermal imaging cameras to help their local community to go out and look, you know, to see to support energy efficiencies, which in turn help fuel poverty. So there's wonderful examples of community energy in action, and it's obviously not just the low carbon generation that's the impact, it's the subsequent funds going back in and on the ground. But appreciate there's still, you know, for us, we see resource been a huge issue, so hopefully our Connect platform will help support that.
Great, thank you very much for that. Will, going to come next to you from Power to Change. Well, you're a supporter of all things community, and there's many questions that are coming in. You know, first of all, how do we define a community? What does it mean to have a community energy project? At what level can we do it? and how do we try and overcome some of the barriers. Alan obviously mentioned that risk capital that is lacking, and great to hear that Younity are providing some of that. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you're supporting those communities and what those communities really are and how they come together? And then perhaps you could just slightly start to introduce community energy together without taking the wind out of Ant's sails. And then we'll come finally to you, Ant. Sorry to leave you hanging. All right, well, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, we always, this is the bum job, I think, going at the end of these events. It's always difficult to come after such a great panel of speakers, and much of what has been said already I agree with. So I'll try not to repeat too much of what's been already said. For those that don't know us, Power to Change works with and supports community businesses across the country to strengthen local economies, build resilience in communities, and ultimately make places better for people and planet. Over half of about the 11,000 community businesses up and down the country are working in the most economically deprived parts. And they are, as we know from our own evidence, and I work with them, they are tackling climate and social issues together. They're employing local people, and they're creating wealth that stays in that local economy. So for us, they are, in many ways, community businesses, community energy groups are the kind of living, breathing embodiment of what a fair and fast transition to net zero needs to look like in our communities, really. I mean, the government's own commission research around this shows that community energy groups produce about 12 to 13 times the more local economic value than you get from commercial developments. So I think it's really important that we focus on that, as well as the fact, I think, as Phil has really mentioned, that it's not just about generation, it's not just about the megawatts here. This is about powering down community energy and community businesses, powering down, looking at energy efficiency and fuel poverty, as well as powering up the country. And I think that's really important. I would echo Alan's comments about the astonishing people and the pioneering leaders that are really driving these projects forward. And they're doing it against the grain. There are altogether far too many barriers that have been holding these people and these communities back. So I just want to mention kind of 3 areas for us that are really important for whatever government that we have to look at boosting the sector, and then coming on to talk about why we, Power to Change, with our partners, have backed community energy together as a new model to kind of boost the sector. So first and foremost, government leadership and a supportive policy framework that centres the needs of communities in the transition to net zero is absolutely essential. Community businesses are too often overlooked as kind of real economic actors by government, despite the fact that they are already delivering the change this country needs, that people want to see, and at a scale that feels tangible to them. So we need explicit government recognition. It's great to hear the comments from Alan today about the important role of community energy within a fast-paced, ambitious, and inclusive energy policy framework. Including real tangible positive support for community energy projects. And many of the things I think that come in that policy and regulatory framework have been sort of touched on today, but some key areas, obviously an end to the planning block on onshore wind. I don't think that's been talked about. That's a really key thing that's been holding the community energy sector back. We need development funding. Alan talked about that at-risk funding for new projects. It's absolutely essential. We need new incentives and routes to market, both for renewables and energy efficiency projects. We've already talked a lot about kind of peer-to-peer trading and local supply and the regulatory change for that. That's essential. And I think finally, kind of fiscal policies. So we need something around shifting investment. So a successor to the social investment tax relief to really scale up investment in this sector. I was just reading this morning, an interesting note that there's well over 1,000 tax reliefs in the system, but none of them are really serving the social economy well. And it's just kind of crazy when you think of the benefits that these organizations are delivering to the UK. So I think alongside that, we obviously, I mean, the elephant in the room around this is there's always been a massive public engagement campaign about actually the reality of what net zero looks like, how we need to get there, and some of the benefits, particularly that these local and community projects can deliver to people and places. I think that's really important, as well as much greater kind of devolution of power and resources away from Westminster, which is something that Power to Change has been arguing for a long time. So secondly, alongside that government leadership and policy framework, we need to invest in capacity building and skills and training and new livelihoods, essentially, from this shift to a zero carbon economy. And we need to focus that support on those communities and people that are going to be most affected. We know the marginalized communities are often on the front line of climate impacts, and they're going to be affected by some of the huge changes in our economy. So it's really important we look to support them. So, I mean, the challenge is, how do we get a community energy business in every single village, town, city, right across the UK, and local power is a real sort of cornerstone of our clear energy future. I think this needs to be much more about a vocational route for young people to get into. We need apprentices and vocational routes for community energy, wider climate action. And we need the sorts of capacity building programs for existing groups and new groups. I think Phil's already mentioned the government support for Community Energy South Pathways program. We need those sorts of programs to be scaled up and to be rolled out across the country to support existing and new activity. And finally, the third thing I want to mention is kind of innovation and that transformational piece around kind of long-term funding. So if we're going to scale community energy, which is essentially what we're talking about here, or a big part of what we're talking about here, the sector definitely needs support for ongoing innovations, and that's across new technologies, different ways of doing finance and scaling up finance, and those new social approaches, reaching the parts of communities that frankly are not of interest to commercial interests or traditional kind of business models. And that needs extra support, and scaling those models and providing access to new markets. We can build viable businesses and deliver these outcomes and impact at a much bigger scale, whilst crucially kind of remaining embedded in local economies. And I think there's an interesting thing here around collective approaches and aggregation. And in doing so, it's possible to secure aligned kind of patient big money. So we're talking about institutional finance here and pension funds, really need to crowd in these sources of finance into the sector to create that scale. So that kind of leads me to come on talking about community energy together, which is one such example that Power to Change and our partners have backed. And it's essentially a form of collectivization to scale finance, which is delivering a step change for the community energy sector and significant kind of long-term benefits for the communities involved. So we got involved in this, Power to Change got involved in this back in 2018, a long time ago now, with our partners Finance Earth, Big Society Capital, and of course the collective of community businesses themselves. So we've got Yelm down in Devon, Wight on the Isle of Wight, Kent, Shropshire and Telford, and you'll shortly hear from Anne in Gower. And I guess, for us starting out, the original aim was to develop and buy up these solar farms, to optimize them, and then crucially get them back into community ownership, providing an anchor asset for that community that was going to provide long-term social, financial, environmental good, while also boosting the sector. And taking this sort of collective scale approach has enabled us to secure a sort of 30 million institutional refinancing deal from one of the largest pensions providers in the market. And that was a genuine first, I think, for the community energy sector. And what it's meant practically is that lower cost of capital flowing into these projects means that they're throwing off more profits that will ultimately reach the community. So it's a really big deal. So when we got these assets and that portfolio was originally built, the profits that we were looking at were about 8.5 million, and I believe now for the whole portfolio we're talking well in excess of 20 million over the lifetime of these assets. So we've been able to kind of boost that, and that will deliver obviously against community needs and priorities for many years, which is great.
Will, shall we
Yeah.
should we let
Anne, yeah, of course, yes, yeah, I'll stop there and you come in and talk more.
Thank you very much, Will. That provides an excellent backdrop to why Community Energy Together was formed, to really try and scale and take these commercial assets into community ownership. Just echoing some of the points that were raised, yes, we need to have the right policy framework and the right tax reliefs to support these types of projects, because despite the fact Ethex has raised about 110 million, largely for community projects, that could have been multiple times larger had the right policy framework been in place, which, you know, was changed quite significantly in around 2015, 2016, when things just started getting going. So we need to get back to that, and we need to bring in this other institutional capital as well. But let's hear from Ant, who's actually doing it on the ground, one of the pioneers that we've been talking about. Welcome, Ant. Why don't you tell us about Community Energy Together?
Well, thank you very much. It's quite hard to follow so many wise words and add much of value, but I'll tell you a little bit about what's been happening with Community Energy Together. As Will said, it's 5 community benefit societies spread around England and Wales. It's a 36 megawatt solar portfolio, and essentially the 5 community benefit societies are collaborating to acquire these operational sites that were commercially owned and now going into community ownership. That's looking to spill out about £20 million worth of community benefit funds, which you know, are going to regenerate those local areas. So it's very much about collaborating, accessing this cheap finance, optimizing the solar assets, so that those communities have got a foundation and a stepping stone to go and do some really good stuff. And at the end of the day, these community benefit societies, they work like sort of like regeneration powerhouses, because they're really close to the ground. They involve people in all sorts of different activities. You know, across our groups, which we've been managing funds, community growth funds already. Across our groups, we've been supporting community growing schemes, solar install, education initiatives, biodiversity initiatives. Down in Yelm, they've set up an electric ferry. There's a ton of different stuff going on the ground. And what essentially for me really sells community energy is it makes people feel empowered. So there's so much going on about climate change that literally people just feel powerless. You know, they can obviously vote, but then they can change their behavior to a certain extent. But they feel powerless. And so community energy, to me, is just this amazing opportunity for people to get empowered and actually do something and see changes in their local area. And so, Community Energy Together, in collaborating, we've created a fantastic investment opportunity. So now we're looking to raise a couple of £1 million between us. We're well over halfway there. The share offers are open at the moment. And you know, we're offering it's about a 6% return, or an expected 6% return. It's a community benefit model where, you know, people obviously buy shares, they become a member of the society, they have a say in how that organization's run. You know, anyone who invests knows that they're really helping things happen at local level that create, you know, proper positive social change that is as needed as, you know, all the issues that we need to address about climate and you know, the nature emergency. So I think you've heard probably enough from all the panel. We'd love to answer questions. Yes, it's great to be part of this.
Great, thank you, Ant. And I love to see that within the sort of those people listening, that some of the people are actually answering the questions as well. So we've got a really thriving discussion going on in the chat here. So let's try and pick up a few of the questions. There was a question which I saw regarding grid connection being particularly challenging. I don't know whether, Ant, you have experienced any difficulties there, and perhaps Will, if you've got any comments there about how organisations or Phil are being supported in that capacity.
Yeah, I can straight off the bat say, yeah, we've lost numerous projects because of the lack of capacity on the grid. We've had everything lined up, funds, planning permission ready to go in, and then we've just literally not been able to get the capacity to connect projects to the grid. So just to echo that is a ongoing problem, and it needs to be sorted, and the process for sorting it seems to be very drawn out.
Will?
Yeah, I think I can add much more there. I mean, Phil might be better, but it's obviously been a massive barrier for a very long time. and it's a absolute priority for action and unlocking absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pretty thorny aspect of the sector and the energy system at large. So it isn't just community energy that's affected by it. So it is much broader than us. It's not something that community energy is specifically suffering from. One thing we've worked with the DNOs in their development of their kind of 5-year plans. We did push them to make clearer the areas that connection is more feasible, because whilst some areas are extremely restricted and almost impossible to get a connection without paying really high costs to physically reinforce the network, there are areas where you could connect tomorrow and the capacity does exist. So the DNOs, the network operators, have done more to make their data available. There are heat maps now for particular areas which show where connection is more possible than others. The problem for community energy is that community energy is inherently place-based. And so if you are a community in a place where your local substation and the transmission network that sits above that is constrained, there's very little you can do about it. So it's inherently a challenge for our sector, because commercial operators can move around the country looking for a good connection option. Community energy can't do that. So it does, as Anne said, prevent us and mean that community energy organisations just lose sites and possible contributions to renewable energy generation because they can't connect, and it's simply financially unfeasible. So effectively a lack of top-down government initiative to change the way the whole grid structure works to facilitate a net zero future is the problem. And because it's such a big problem, that's one of the reasons why it hasn't really moved very much over the last few years.
Thank you. Alan, you're on mute.
Just coming briefly to perhaps to assure everybody that yes, we're really on the case on this as far as grid is concerned. I mean, it's a huge national issue. I personally think it's actually now going to be one of the biggest constraints to getting us to net zero over a period, because we're finding nationally that big projects are now being given by National Grid connection offers of say 2035 or something like that, and so you've got the prospect of an enormous amount of stuff coming out and simply having to sit there, if it can get that far, if the lack of connection doesn't kill the project, while we're waiting for that electricity to come through. But also it's very much a question in terms of community energy, as has been said, about place-based stuff, which is pretty much the responsibility of the DNO and not the National Grid. But what we've actually got to do is to develop a coherent policy of strengthening and bringing new cables in at high level in the National Grid, but also clearing obstacles at DNO level. So both connecting up, using demand side management much better, and among other things, getting the queue of connections developed into people who are really developing, rather than people who are just holding places because they think that might be a commercial opportunity for the future. So it's a comprehensive piece of work that needs to be done on grids as a whole, and community energy development is actually worse placed, as has been said, in terms of these particular problems. So we've got to do it systematically across the whole of the system, and so we're certainly committed to moving that forward.
Thanks, Alan. I just want to play devil's advocate very briefly on a question regarding centralized body versus innovative companies. So Alan, what's your view there? And then I'm going to come to you, Michaela.
Yeah, I was looking at that in the chat, and I think maybe there's I wouldn't say misunderstanding, but a need for some clarity on what a centralised body might do in terms of supporting community and local energy. No intention whatsoever of taking any control or management away from local energy projects. It's more like a much larger version of a number of things we've already had discussed today, of how you can bring in support and assistance across the country for everybody who's engaged in these sort of issues. That wouldn't be done through the nationalisation of the projects or a national body trying to direct people as to where they're going. And indeed, that funding would be pretty much devolved for management, say, to local authorities and various other bodies. But the most important point there is that funding would be there underpinning and supporting and facilitating those community and local projects going forward. And I think there was maybe it's me mumbling through my moustache. We're not talking about 1 million, we're talking about 8 billion, which would be available over a period through Great British Energy for that kind of work. But it's certainly not a question of anybody taking any control away. And indeed, the opposite is the case, because you actually need that local control and management and organisation to unleash the full possibility of those sort of schemes.
Thank you. And Michaela, just coming to you, what do you need from any government to make your innovative, commercial yet community focused solutions really scale up?
Yeah, no, we just need community energy groups to thrive, and that's what we're here to kind of support. So everything that's been mentioned, the grid queues, the funding, the capacity, etc. If the policy and the rules of the road can enhance that, then we in turn can, work together with community energy groups. And obviously, regulatory reform, so you can do more of a local kind of energy supply model would be fabulous. But I think on the whole, it is just, we need more renewables, we need them at speed. And so this mention of, this kind of centralised body that Labour are putting forward, I think, is a wonderful initiative, because we need more renewables and we need them now. So I think anything we can do to accelerate that transition can only be a good thing. And I think if we all have got the same targets and objectives and are here to do the right thing, then I think there's place for absolutely everyone. And I'm very, very pleased to see that it's on Labour's agenda and very supportive of it. But yes, we just want community energy groups to have as much support as possible. And so working with the teams and where we can help play a part in that through our loans, etc., is where we want to progress.
Great, thank you. And just wrapping up now, Ant, I'm going to come to you. Obviously, you're head down trying to make community energy together the great success that it has the potential to be. But what are your views on the future for community energy? And then just coming lastly to you, Phil, to round out from a sort of overall community energy point of view.
Right, it's thanks, Lisa. I mean, obviously, community energy has got such a hugely important role to play in our energy transition and in developing communities for good. What excites me so much about community energy together, I'm not sure whether this got hammered home earlier, is that we're increasing the solar, community-owned solar, by 20% in England and Wales. So what we're doing is essentially demonstrating that communities can operate at scale, like significant scale. And so, hearing the talk of, £8 million or how much Alan mentioned. Billion pounds. Yeah. I mean, £1 billion. I mean, it's there for taking. I think communities are up to the challenge. It's great that there's going to be lots of policy changes going forward with the right government, and there's definitely support organisations for communities and funders and all sorts of different organisations there that are helping everyone on the ground collaborate and deliver stuff. So yeah, I think by many extents, the future can be bright if through community energy lens, because we've got capacity to do some really exciting stuff. It's a resilient bunch of people in the sector, and definitely up for the challenge. So yeah, it's exciting, and they probably need to plug the share offer that is live. If any of the listeners want to invest, that's a very welcome contribution. And looking forward to the future.
Lovely. And just coming to you, Phil, for the last round out.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. And just echo everything Anne said, yeah, straight from the mouth of a practitioner in the sector who's getting things done and making things happen. You can support the sector by joining your local community energy organisation as a member, get involved, you can invest. As Anne said, the share offer is out for Community Energy Together, but there are other share offers more broadly across the sector. You'll find them on our website and more on Ethex as well. So invest, show your financial support. Write to your MP. On our website, we have campaigning tools, draft letters, draft tweets. Make sure your local MP, your political party of choice, the other political parties who are not your choice, make sure they all know that community energy is important and it needs government support. So there are a range of ways you can get involved, you can help, and you can sort of join this movement, which is just trying to make energy happen ourselves. So yeah, you can be part of that.
Perfect. Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone taking the time today on the panel to speak about this, which is something very close to my heart as well, and to everybody listening in. So thank you for the wealth of information, and for those of you that have contributed to the chat. We will pick up the main points. If there's anything we can send out afterwards, we will. And thank you very much for your time today. It's been a great session. Thank you, panel, and thank you everyone listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.